and welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, I feel like a bit of a confessional mood today. It's a sort of a case of, bless me father, for it's been 5 months since my last episode on Springbank. Oh yes. So I thought it was about time that I did another episode of the show on Springbank, because I like Springbank, and I'll be honest with you, I know it's going to get a lot of views because, well, there seems to be a lot of Springbank aficionados out there, and you're all mad as far as I'm concerned. You're all as mad as the lot that follow Ardbeg, in a nice way, that is. Anyway, so yes, I've kind of got together enough samples now over the course of time to sort of warrant doing an episode. As you can see, the bulk of them come from the distillery itself, so as always, a big thank you to Grant at Springbank for putting up with my continual requests for samples. I mean, he pretty much knows that whenever he sends me an email saying we've got these new releases, he'll get one back saying, can I have a sample please? And it's just because obviously I want to entertain you guys, and obviously the one sample that isn't actually from the distillery comes courtesy of my good friend in Sunderland, so thank you for the local barley bottling, or the 9-year-old anyway, and I did get a sample from the distillery of that particular bottling, and I could well have used it in a previous episode of the show. I've done so many of them now, nearly, I don't know, 300 and something odd, and I have kind of lose track of what I have and haven't done, to be perfectly honest with you. But anyway, I know I've done quite a fair few on Springbank over the years, so I don't really need to say a great deal other than let's have a look at the lineup. I'm still in love with you. Okay, so we're going to kick off with the aforementioned 9-year-old local barley. This was released in probably early 2019, I believe, or could have been it was bottled in October of 2018. I probably got the sample, I would guess, sort of tail end of 2018, early 2019. So it was bottled at 57.7%, like I said, 9 years old, distilled in July of 2009. And it was matured in a combination of 80% sherry and 20% bourbon. And the second local barley bottling we're going to be looking at is the 10-year-old. Now this was released in the tail end of 2009. It was bottled in October, distilled again in July of 2009. Slightly different cask makeup, only by a quite considerable amount in actual fact. 77% bourbon, 20% sherry and 3% port. Interesting. Bottle of 56.2%. So yeah, quite looking forward to that. Bottle number 3 we're looking at, as you can see, is the 15-year-old fully rum matured bottling that came out in November 2019, I think it was. Distilled in December of 2003, bottled in August of 2019, and bottled at 51%, like I said, 100% rum matured. So yeah, looking forward to that. Then we're going to move on to the this year's bottling of the 12-year-old cask strength, which was released I think sort of February time. Interestingly enough, as you well know, the 12-year-old cask strength bottling tends to be more shifted towards the sherry end of the spectrum. It's normally, if it's not 100% sherry, it's often sort of, around about 80-20. Interestingly enough, this particular bottling of the 12-year-old is completely the other way around, insofar that it is 65% bourbon and 35% sherry. Now, I don't know whether that was deliberately done by the distillery because they fancied doing it that way around, or whether it was just a case of, at that particular time, they didn't have enough 12-year-old sherry casks to do a bottling. I mean, it comes out twice a year. I don't know. I mean, maybe it was purely a stylistic reasoning for this particular bottling. Who knows? And then we're going to finish off with 2 Longrows. The first one we're going to be looking at is, again, last year's release of the 21-year-old. Now, this is certainly the oldest age statement Longrow that I've had the opportunity to taste. So really quite looking forward to that. 40% bourbon, 60% sherry, and bottled at 46%. So could be interesting. And finally, we're looking at the Longrow Red 13-year-old, which was released earlier this year. Certainly in I think it was February time. So it's spent 10 years in a combination of bourbon and sherry, with 3 years finishing in ex-Chilean Cabernet Sauvignon casks from the Intriga estate. I don't know that particular winery, it has to be said, but that's what they used, and it was bottled at 51.6%. So an interesting lineup, I think. So let's kick off with a bit of local barley then. Right, okay, so let's start off with the 9-year-old local barley. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Earthy, oily, fishy, barleyed, obviously. It's got a sort of a raw kind of husky kind of barley character, almost really grippy. There's a little bit of rose petal notes. It's obviously got that youthfulness to it, but there's a touch of coffee, some salt, little bit of little nutty note. I mean, it's pleasant. I mean, it's not too young, it's not too raw. There's a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of violets, and a little bit of buddy cat. Hello, little buddy cat. That's no, come on. Oh, honestly, pitch invasion. So anyway, yeah, where was I? Yeah, so oh, good grief. What do they say about working with children and animals? It's an interesting nose. It's a pleasant nose. Like I said, it's got a rawness to it, but it's not sort of overly pretty cat, but not overly raw. Let's see what the palate gives us. Opens up with more of the honeyed notes, more of the sort of oily honeyed notes. Again, there's that sort of young barley, that sort of slightly raw barley kind of character. A little bit of fish oils, lovely aftertaste, sort of violets, a little bit of spiciness, a little bit of dried fruit, some vanilla. It's got a nice length. Again, yes, there is that slight rose petally, Turkish delighty sort of character there, just to sort of like remind you that it is relatively young spirit, but it's malty, it's chewy, it's got a nice density to it. Pleasant, you know. Let's have a look and see what a little drop of water does to it. A little bit fresher, a little bit brighter, a little bit more fruitiness. It's kind of sort of toned down the oiliness of the spirit a little bit. I'm certainly getting orange or sort of tangerine. I'm getting apple, hyacinth. A little bit more noticeable American note, just a little. So I'm getting a slight toffee note now. Still quite barleyed. See what that's like. Talk about grippy spice finish, it's kind of gripping me throat. So yeah, the palate is a little bit fresher, it's a little less oily. I'm probably picking up a little bit more sherry spice. Again, there's a lovely maltiness, that raw cereal kind of character. spice, a lot of spice on the finish. I mean, that's pleasant. I really enjoyed that. I mean, it's got a lovely character. It's not too young. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what an extra year has done to it. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 10-year-old. Now, apparently the barley for this particular bottling was grown at a Catterdale farm. Now, I don't know where the barley came from for the 9-year-old. I don't know whether it came from the same place, so I don't know if we're kind of like looking at sort of pretty much the same barley, same sort of spirit, just a year older. Anyway, but let's see what the nose are like. A little bit more peat on the nose for this particular bottling. The port is kind of, I mean, I'm not getting an overt red fruit, but it's kind of like almost making the sherry more noticeable, although the sherry is only sort of 20%. I mean, I'm guessing that on the 9-year-old that the sherry was probably refilled sherry. There may well be the odd first fill sherry, but in this particular bottling, because I'm certainly picking up more of the sherry on the nose, a little bit more earthiness, a bit more fishiness. Still got a little bit of raw cereal, but it feels just that little bit more evolved than the 9-year-old, even though it's just an extra year. Touch of coffee, sort of nutty, sort of almond coffee. Yeah, that's a lovely nose. I really like that. That is really quite impressive. It has to be said. So the palate side. Again, that sherry is punching above its weight. There's quite a bit of sherry tannin, dried fruit, which again would lead me to believe that there's probably, if not some first fill butts in that, there's certainly some more active refilled casks. Again, it's got that lovely natural kind of barley character. Not to say that Springbank itself doesn't have a natural character, but it just seems to me that the local barley, I don't know whether this is all in my head or not, just has that more natural character. Again, a really lovely spiciness on the finish. There's a little bit of dried fruit. I'm getting a little porty note, not a huge amount. Getting more sort of loam and earth and a little bit of peat and malt. But that's got a lovely intensity. I really think that was an absolute superb bottling. I'm going to put a little drop of water with it just to see what that does to it. Well, again, like on the 9-year-old, it's made the nose a bit lighter. I'm getting an almost kind of Sauvignon Blanc kind of white fruit grassiness. Less sherry, more oily, fishy barley notes, and again that sort of touch of violets, which I often pick up on in Springbank, and that is a lovely nose. That really is absolutely delightful. See what the palate's like now. Again, a little lighter, getting more of the American oak now. Now that now I've added a little drop of water to it, a little bit more vanilla, a little bit of creaminess. Again, lots of barley. I'm not getting any of the sort of Turkish Delight, Rose Petal Mari kind of character that I picked up on in the 9-year-old. So that extra year appears to have just removed that from the equation. Again, really quite malty, maybe not quite as spicy on the finish as the 9-year-old, but still lovely finish, lovely natural character. Yeah, that was a lovely bottling. My heart is broken in two. Can't you see it's Right, okay, so let's move on to the 15-year-old Rum Matured. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Quite banana-y, quite a lot of rum character. It's got that slightly Guyana-y kind of high-tone note. Rummy, dried fruit, fish oil, bit of brine. Like I said, quite a lot of banana, quite fleshy, a little bit of barley. Touch of vanilla. That is lovely. I love the sweetness that the rum cask is imparting. And although it is quite noticeable, it's not blanketing. I think that's a lovely balance on that nose. Touch of salt, little bit of fishiness. It's certainly quite broad, quite full. And that's certainly what the cask has kind of brought to this particular bottling. See what it tastes like. Soft, juicy, sweet, rummy, bananas. Touch of dried fruit, really full, weighty. The character of the spirit is kind of coming through more towards the end when you're starting to get sort of the fish, the brine, a little bit of smoke. But that really is quite juicy and quite fruity. Again, like I said, really nicely balanced. I'm getting a touch of violets, a little bit of wood spice on the aftertaste. That is absolutely gorgeous. I really like that. I could sip and drink that. Right, okay, so moving on to the 12-year-old cask strength, so 55.3. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Obviously more bourbon-y than sherry. But in saying that, I mean, the sherry again is not sitting in the background. It is there, it's noticeable. It's kind of classically 12-year-old Springbank, really. It's fishy, it's briny, there's a little bit of peat, some soft, slightly sweet dried fruits, a little bit of wood smoke, bit of violet, bit of licorice. I mean, it's kind of classic. It's sort of, this is the 12-year-old I like. I mean, I'm not the world's biggest fan of sherry, as you well know. So to me, this is absolutely gorgeously balanced. Yeah, that's a nice nose. See what the pat's like. Fishy, briny, barley. The sherry only really starts coming in on the mid palate, and it's still got a presence. It's still got plenty of dried fruit, a little bit of spice, a little bit of wood smoke. Quite a lot of wood smoke on the finish, in actual fact, with a little bit of peatiness as well. Good intensity. I think that spiciness is really building, in actual fact. I mean, again, it has that lovely sort of grittiness to it that I kind of quite like. With I mean, it's obviously the way that the sort of the spirit matures or interacts, I should say, with the sherry, and I just love that kind of grittiness, that natural kind of character. It's not a polished sherry. It's not a Macallan kind of or a Dalmore-y kind of over polished sherry. Blanketing character. It's got that lovely kind of roughness, natural character, I would say. But yeah, that's really nice, and I don't really think it needs any water, but I am going to put a little drop of water with it just to see what does indeed happen to it. Now again, the sherry is really kind of slinked off, shall we say. It's more certainly more American oak aged Springbank. It's pretty much, you know, as you would expect, you know, violety, briny, fishy. See what the pass I am. If anything, that's probably emphasised the sherry. It's certainly brought out a sweeter dried fruit element, sort of almost kind of like, you know, almost kind of red currants, that kind of thing. It's certainly more fishier, more brinier, a little bit softer possibly. I don't think it really needed a drop of water. It was just interesting to see what a little drop of water would do to it, and so so it's kind of, yeah, you take it whichever way you like. So, but yeah, that is, to me, that is a lovely 12-year-old with, you know, just a judicious amount of sherry. Right, okay, let's move on to the Longrow 21. Looking forward to this. See what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Quite austere, really fishy, really sulphury. That is not a great nose. I know there's a lot of you that like Springbank a little bit on the dirty side, and you like your sulphur, but to me, no, I'm not loving this. There's a sort of, in amongst all that sort of sulphuriness, there's an almost kind of petrol-y kind of note, but we're not talking sort of pleasant Riesling-like petrol. We're talking sort of kerosene-y sort of. Yeah, it's an odd nose. I mean, it's not one that I'm absolutely loving, it has to be said, and there did seem to be a lot of debate when this was released. There were a lot of people that loved it, and there were equally a number of people that didn't particularly like it, and I must admit that for what, almost 200 quid it was going for, yeah. A little bit of fruit kind of coming out now, a little bit of crystallised orange. I mean, I love the maturity, I love the sort of soft peatiness of it, but I just don't love that sulphur note. That's just, no. See what the pass like. It's okay. I mean, again, that sulphury dirtiness is kind of making it feel really astringent, slightly bitter. Yeah, there's a little bit of peat there, some lovely maturity. If that was me, I would have loved to have seen that just wholly in American oak. I mean, I love Longrow aged in American oak. I would have really liked to have seen what that was like. Because to be honest with you, there's obviously some tainted cherry butts have gone in there, and it really has quite ruined it in my personal opinion. And you just can't. I can't get past that sulphur character. You know, you know, I'm desperately trying to see what the spirit is like at this sort of age, and I just feel, you know, a little bit let down that I can't do that because of this sort of sulphur. Like I said, I know there's probably a number of you that don't mind that like it a little bit dirty, but to me, I just think that's sort of, no. My heart is broken. My heart is broken. Right, and on to the final bottling of the day. This is the 13-year-old Longrow Red. Let's see what the nose gives on this. You know, that's actually quite a subtle nose. I mean, I often tend to find the red bottling is kind of like a real in-your-face, you know, kind of bottling. You know, you get sort of, whoa, this wine and peat and what have you. And this is actually, quite restrained, you know, dare I say it's slightly elegant for a Longrow Red. It's got some lovely peat, it's got some black pepper, chunky red fruit, yes, putty cats as well. No, not in, yeah, here. There's a touch of vanilla, a little bit of strawberry fruit, yeah, there's a little bit of strawberry fruit, a little bit of pineapple, tar, more brine, vanilla. Oh, that's a lovely nose. That is really gorgeous. Like I said, you know, although, you know, it's spent 3 years in ex Cabernet Sauvignon cask, I think that's just about the right time, because it is just not, it's not overkill on the wine. Really quite well balanced. Sort of pass on. Kind of kicks off again quite subtly, and it builds really nicely. That finish is kind of like tarry, peaty, winey, red licorice, red fruits, strawberries. You know, it's got a lovely finish to it, and it kind of, like I said, it kind of slowly sort of builds into a sort of like a lovely crescendo. Again, slightly fishy, slightly oily. Really nice. That is absolutely gorgeous. I don't think that actually needs any water at all, because I think well, it's just damn good at this ABV, I think. So yeah, that is a lovely one to finish with. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. Well, I thought it was a really interesting tasting. The 9-year-old local barley, I mean, they are a bit on the expensive side, it has to be said, the local barley bottlings, and you know, I quite like the 9-year-old. I mean, it had a youthfulness, and like I said, they seem to have a sort of a real natural kind of character to them, and like I said, I don't know whether that's kind of more of a case of, you know, my implication, or whether it really does have that sort of natural kind of character. But either way, I thought that was a nice bottling. Whether I would have paid whatever the full whack was, I don't know. The 10-year-old local barley I thought was absolutely really lovely. The balance of casks I thought was absolutely spot on. It was really quite interesting to sort of see a little bit of port matured spirit in there. Again, wasn't overly sherried or overly porty. I mean, the sherry was probably a little bit more noticeable. But again, I thought the balance was really good. So yeah, really like that. The Rumwood, well, probably the star of the show, I think. I mean, I love Springbank when they use rum casks. It adds a sweetness that obviously the spirit itself doesn't have, and yeah, it just gives it a whole new kind of dimension. And I really like that. I thought that was absolutely gorgeous. The 12-year-old, certainly by far and away my favourite. My favourite 12-year-old that I can remember of late, shall we say. And again, it's all about the sherry American oak balance, and in this instance, obviously less sherry, more character, or more distillery character, which for me personally is always a plus. The Longrow 21, I really wanted to like that. I mean, you know, I've tasted the Longrow 18 on a fair few occasions, and so, you know, I really wanted to see what a few more years would do to the spirit. And it, yeah, you know, it was just cask selection. I mean, you know, and it was a real shame. That's what I thought. It was just, you know, like I said, they're going to be number of you guys that love that, you know, because you like it a bit down and dirty. For me, it just ruined what could have been an absolutely standout bottling, but that's my opinion. And the Longrow Red, 13-year-old, absolutely gorgeous. Again, really well balanced, and like I said, not quite so sort of overtly winey as some of the previous Longrow Red bottlings have been. You know, it's not slapping me round the face with, you know, wine cask notes. It's a little bit better balanced, and the wininess is more supporting rather than sort of, you know, being right up there in your face. So anyway, so there you go. That's this week's episode of the show. I hope you've enjoyed it, and you know, hope you'll watch next week's episode, so whatever that will be. Until then, all that's left to say is good afternoon and good dramming.